Greetings from Tokyo. This is Daisuke, and I hope all of you are doing very well. I certainly am doing well because I am very, very happy to welcome another wonderful guest. She is a dear friend of me and this channel and all of us. And I think a lot of you know her already from the wonderful work that she is doing on her great YouTube channel, which is called Mainly Movies. And here from Mainly Movies, we have our dear friend Alyssa. So, Alyssa, welcome.
Thank you. Greetings from Maine, to steal your catchphrase there. Thank you so much for having me on. This is extremely exciting. I'm a very big fan of your channel. I think it's great, and so this is kind of surreal for me.
Oh, you were so complimentary. That's very kind of you. And really, the pleasure and honor is all mine. I am a big fan of your channel, and I have been for some time. And I think from that, I think we began a kind of maybe YouTube comment correspondence type of thing, I think. And then from there, your channel was talking about many kinds of films, which I'm also a very big fan of. And also you come to this channel and you comment on a number of videos. And so it's just a real pleasure to be able to talk with you face to face. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. The pleasure is all mine.
Oh, and so without further ado, my friend Alyssa, let me just ask you. So, right now, at the moment, you are, of course, watching movies. You are talking about movies. You are based on the background, your shelves there. You are obviously a very enthusiastic fan of cinema. And so I'd like to ask you from the start, what were some of those films that you recall watching growing up that you could say really had a great influence on you? Or another way to put it maybe would be, what are some of those milestone or landmark films that you remember growing up that you could say had an influence on you such that they helped you become the film enthusiast that you are today?
Yeah, so I kind of had a good experience with movies when I was pretty young. I watched a lot of movies, and got the opportunity to go to the movie theater quite a bit when I was a kid. And so I kind of got my start with movies pretty young. The first movie, probably the first big one for me, right? First milestone movie would be The Lion King. That was the first film I saw at the movie theater. It was also the first movie I saw at the drive-in too. So it was kind of a big movie for me. I was 4 years old at the time, and it struck me. I had been watching movies at home, as much as like a 3-year-old can watch movies, but that was just a big experience. Just the experience of actually going to the theater, but then having that film. And that movie is one that has really stuck with me. I love I absolutely love that one as a kid. I was kind of obsessed with the Lion King. I had everything Lion King. I had, Lion King birthday parties and, wallpaper, the whole thing. But that's one that kind of stuck with me as I've grown up. And I think that's a really cool thing about movies, and especially movies that you see when you're young, that sometimes they can kind of stay with you and carry through with you through different stages in your life. When I was little, Simba was like, young Simba was like, I just can't wait to be king, all excited to grow up. And then as you get older, kind of experiencing more things, maybe seeing that not everything in life is great, having that kind of transition. Then the whole, Hakuna Matata phase, right, as like a teenager. And then as you get older, taking on responsibilities, eventually there'll be the Mufasa stage, right? So, I mean, it's one of those movies that can really evolve our perspective, or at least my perspective and my feelings for it have evolved over time. And it's one that I've seen hundreds of times, right? But like I get something different and something new out of it each time. Plus, it's just a really good movie. It's great animation, great story, great songs. And so that was probably the first big one for me that has had a kind of broad impact. But I mean, I saw a lot of like I said, a ton of movies when I was a little kid, a lot of Disney, so a bunch of other ones. Mulan would be another kind of big Disney one for me, having kind of a strong female lead character that kind of was independent and doing her own thing. That was pretty big for 8-year-old me. And let's see, I mean, even getting a little bit older, I saw probably junior high or so. So 12, 13 was when I started to kind of get into movies more from a broader perspective, not just for entertainment. I mean, obviously, 4-year-old me wasn't analyzing Lion King like I just did now, but it was junior high that I started to kind of get into other big movies. The Shining was a big one in kind of my preteen years. Stephen King, just in general, was pretty big for me. But The Shining was one that I got kind of interested in the filmmaking side of things and kind of the cinematography and stuff like that. The Shining was one that I kind of the first movie that I really sort of analyzed, I guess, if you will, kind of did reviews for. In high school, I took some film classes, some college I did too. And so that was kind of my starting point for that. But, just the whole kind of gamut of film, right? All the different types of genres and stuff have always been interesting to me. I mean, another kind of big one back, kind of going back to young years for me was Psycho. As kind of strange as that might sound for a little kid, I was really into that film. I think the first time I saw it, I was 7, and Psycho's one that Alfred Hitchcock is a big director for me, and I really enjoy a lot of his films. And I know we've talked about Hitchcock a little bit on your channel, in comments of your channel. But Psycho was one that connected with me when I was really young. For this one, it's kind of a strange story, but when I was young, we went on a vacation to Florida. So we went there mostly for Disney World, but we went to SeaWorld and Universal Studios. And at the time, they had this, and they might still have it, I don't know, but they had this sort of Hitchcock attraction, if you will. It wasn't really a ride, but it was sort of like a museum and behind the scenes kind of stuff for Hitchcock movies, including Psycho. And at the time, I had never seen Psycho. I hadn't seen any Hitchcock. I didn't even know who he was. I was 6 years old. I didn't know anything about movies. And so I was really adamant about going in this, though. And I remember my dad was kind of like, "You sure?" And I'm like, "I want to see everything here." And so we went in, and there was a lot to it, and I'm sure there's plenty that I don't remember from that. But one thing really stuck with me, and there was this kind of display and kind of video that they were showing us about the shower scene in Psycho. And so there's that one iconic shot. There's plenty of iconic shots in Psycho, but there's one shot during the shower scene where we just see the drain and we see the blood kind of circling in the water going down the drain. And I remember just, again, 6 years old, not really that knowledgeable about movies, never really thought of them as something that people made. They were just something to watch, not something that people actually created to me at that time. But I saw that, and I remember they talked about how instead of blood, or instead of fake blood, they used chocolate syrup for that scene to get the right consistency. And I remember thinking that was the coolest thing ever. And, I was really curious about why they didn't use strawberry syrup, right? And then they were talking about, the black and white photography, so the contrast was higher with chocolate syrup as opposed to strawberry. And that was amazing to me. That really stuck with me. And so I was kind of, a little almost obsessed with Psycho after that. I hadn't seen it still, right? I didn't really know anything about the story, but I knew that thing, right? That scene. And so I remember watching Psycho shortly after, probably like half a year later, finally, and just, thinking it was cool and be like, "Oh, the chocolate syrup," when I got to that scene. I still do, every time I watch that, I'm like, "Yep, chocolate syrup." And so it's one of those ones that kind of opened my eyes to movies being more than just entertainment, even at a young age, kind of having that. And of course, broadening up to kind of the creepier movies and thrillers and Hitchcock in general.
That is really interesting. That is really interesting. You bring up a number of things. First of all, before I forget, I have to say that, so this is the Universal Studios, like Hitchcock tour or show
Yeah.
or whatever it was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't.
it was, and it was like, was there a part where you wore 3D glasses?
I don't
And
remember. It was
okay,
quite a
okay,
while
yeah,
ago.
okay. So you were you of course you said you were young at the time. So I think I might have gone to the same attraction or something.
Mm.
And I think if it's the same one, I think there was also a bit where you could there was some 3D thing where the birds were coming out of the screen or
That
something
sounds
like that.
familiar. Yeah,
Was it?
that sounds
Okay.
familiar.
So
Yeah,
it's
and then they still
probably the
had the
same
house,
one.
right? They still had the Bates house and the motel set up, right?
Yes,
And the
that's
back
right.
lot.
That's
Yeah.
right, exactly. So it was this sort of experience, I suppose. And I remember
Hmm.
I went there when I was a kid as well with my parents. And when that, I just, for whatever reason, when the birds 3D thing came up, I remember my dad was sitting next to me, I think, or something. I just looked over to him and he was doing this. It was like the birds were coming at him. So he's just trying to attack them with his hands, I think. But that was just a, yeah. So I think I was very much, I too was a Hitchcock film fan when I was young. And you bring up something so interesting. I never really thought about it before until this moment, which is, yeah, why it's so, it's such a simple question and yet I'm so I never thought about it until now. It's so great. It's such a great question. Why not strawberry syrup? Right. And I know the reason, but you ask it, and that's yeah, that right, right. It's so natural to ask that kind of question. Why chocolate? Why not strawberry? So, oh wow, thank you so much for that. That I never thought about that before, but thank you so much for that. And um, you bring up also the the Shining and Stephen King, and I want to get to that in a moment. But the first thing that you mentioned was about The Lion King, and you saw it in the theater, and then you also saw it in the drive-in, which I think is a real fascinating experience. Do you remember a little bit about the drive-in theater experience?
Yeah, I mean, I we used to go to the drive-in probably 2 or 3 times every summer when I was growing up. We had one that was, we didn't have any that were like super, super close, but it was like a 40-minute drive, 45-minute drive to our closest drive-in. But we used to do it pretty regularly because I really enjoyed it, which is kind of silly. It's not actually the best for watching a movie. It's you kind of have it's more of an experiential thing. Being able to be in the back of the car, kind of as a kid you're stuck in the back, and so you're kind of looking past like everybody, looking past the headrests of the car seats. So it's like it's not the best viewing experience, but it's very fun. And I hadn't gone for quite a while, and I went once, probably 4 years ago or so, was the last time I went to the drive-in. And then I haven't been since, but we do actually have one up here in Maine because I grew up in New York. And so that's kind of where all this childhood based stuff was happening in upstate New York. But I'm in Maine now. And we actually have one that recently reopened. It had been closed for decades, I guess, long before I ever came up here. And it recently reopened 2 years ago, I think. I haven't been to it since. That's one of the actual places that's still open right now. They actually recently just reopened our regular theaters here too. We're in the right phase or whatever in Maine, but I haven't been to any of them yet because it's all older films that are being shown, which is fun and great. But like I have all those movies on Blu-ray and I've seen them so many times, and there's not, I haven't felt the draw to or the need to go to the theater or drive-in yet. But it's interesting with the drive-in. At least I think part of the one of the coolest things that I always enjoyed as a kid about it was that you have a double feature. You go and it's two movies, so you get to stay in. Usually, at least when I was a kid, it was always kind of like a kids movie first, and then there was more of a PG-13 or more kind of adult aimed movie later. And so I always kind of got to see movies that I probably wouldn't have otherwise gone if we had just gone to the regular theater, because I got that second movie. So Twister is a good example of one that I saw at the drive-in and really kind of fell in love with. And that one was actually kind of especially an exciting experience because I don't know if you've seen Twister lately or remember much of the movie, but there's a scene that happens at a drive-in where a tornado comes, and kind of funnily enough, the Shining is the movie that's playing at the drive-in in that scene. So connecting a little bit there. But that was always something I enjoyed during the summer as a kid.
Interesting. Yeah, I have seen Twister. I actually saw Twister in the movie theater when it was initially released, right? That was with Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton,
Hmm.
right? Yes,
Yeah.
that's very exciting sort of summer blockbuster type of film, right? So,
Yeah.
oh wow, I haven't seen it in a while. Maybe I should revisit it. So, but and you mentioned right about the current situation and how I think the one of the films that had been planned to be released this summer would have been Mulan, the live
Mm.
action version of
Yeah.
Mulan. Is that correct? And
Yeah,
so,
that was supposed to be March.
right. So, but that hasn't been released in theaters
No.
for obvious reasons, right? And it's still up in the air as to what will actually happen as far as a movie theater release schedule goes. But that aside, that the live action version of Mulan brings up another question that I have, and I think you've talked about this on your own channel. But the question is, because you have obviously this great affinity for the Lion King, the Disney animated version of the Lion King, and you also mentioned other animated films that you'd seen as a kid growing up. What has been your reaction thus far to the recent Disney live action versions of many of these animated classics that we know so well? So, for instance, of course, there's The Lion King. There's been, I mean, I think we can include The Jungle Book in there as well.
Yeah.
Mulan is coming up, so we haven't seen that yet. But The Beauty and the Beast, right?
Hmm.
And so, what has been your reaction to this trend, if you will, of live action remakes or reinterpretations or different live action versions of these well loved animated classics?
So I'm kind of mixed on it a little bit. You know, I know that kind of a very common consensus is that people hate them, you know, and that it's, or at least in the film kind of community, I know, you know, in terms of box office, people love them, but in terms of kind of people, you know, in the reviewing communities aren't the biggest fans. But you know, I don't really have a big problem with them. I'm not huge on most of them. I think they're okay. You know, I haven't hated any of them. But at the same time, like, you know, I'm never going to probably opt to watch the remake again instead of the original now that I've seen the remakes. Um, for the most part, at least, you know, some of these live action remakes have been more rebooty. You know, they're kind of like not remakes exactly, but like reimaginings and kind of taking things in different directions, which you know, I think there's kind of pros and cons to that. You know, on one hand, if you really love one of these kind of original animated movies and then they change everything, you're going to be like, why did you change that? You know, like, it was perfectly good. Why do all this to change it? But then if you stick too closely, right, then everybody's like, oh, it's just a shot for shot remake. And like, why'd you even bother? And so in terms of like, uh, you know, analysis and kind of, you know, people you know, kind of criticizing these movies, I don't think there's really a way to win. You know, you're gonna either please some people or, you know, or the other, you know, half of people. And so for me, it's been kind of, you know, kind of more on the like, not why bother in terms of, you know, shot for shot, but kind of just, I don't know. There, you know, I'd rather watch the originals for many of these. But to be honest, most of the ones that have been remade, I've never been like huge fan of the original animated versions. So like we had, like you said, Beauty and the Beast. I do like the animated one, but that's never been one that was like a really deep connected one for me. Same with Aladdin. Dumbo is another one. Those three all came out last year for the remakes. The Lion King. The Lion King's one that you know, I'm kind of in the minority here, but I actually liked the Lion King live action, you know, photorealistic animated version. You know, I certainly don't like it as much as the original. Like, I love the original animated one, but the new one I think has some merit. You know, I mean, it's the animation, the photorealism of it is like amazing. You know, and that's kind of uh, you know, a step beyond what Favreau, the director, did with The Jungle Book, because he also directed that live action remake. And so that kind of incorporated sort of that photorealistic CGI background, but then had Mowgli as, you know, an actual human in the movie. But of course, all the animals in Jungle Book, you know, Baloo and everybody were CGI characters. But now in The Lion King, everything is CGI except for, I guess, supposedly one shot at the very beginning, kind of during the circle of life scene with the sunrise. I guess part of that one shot of like a tree or something was an actual real shot, but everything else in the movie was, you know, computer generated. But I don't mind it, and it's one of those things where, you know, like people are gonna enjoy it and other people won't. And so just because there's a Lion King remake doesn't mean that, you know, the Lion King animated Blu-ray that I have on my shelf is all of a sudden gonna disappear, right? It's still there. I can still enjoy that, and it's not gonna affect, you know, that movie or my enjoyment of it. So like, I mean, people, I think one of the arguments is people would rather studios like Disney focus on new content, right? Making new stories and new movies. And I think there's merit to that. But, you know, this is a way to bring some of these classic movies to a, you know, younger generation that's grown up with computer generated animation. And, you know, not that, you know, hand drawn or computer generated is, you know, one or the other's better. It's just a different style, and people get used to different things and like different things. And so you know, personally, I don't really like many of the live action remakes, but I don't have a problem with them.
Well said. Well said. I like that very much, and that also reminds me also that earlier you had said that you also were very much into, or you were fascinated by your initial watch of the film The Shining. And you had also mentioned because you were also very much a fan of the works of Stephen King, the author Stephen King. And so I have to ask you, so what are some of your favorite Stephen King works?
So it depends if we're talking books or movies. I'm gonna stick with movies here since
Sure.
this is a movie channel. But The Shining is probably one of my biggest ones, which is interesting because it's so different from the book. And you know, Stephen King kind of distanced himself from that Kubrick adaptation for a very long time, and still isn't the biggest fan. But with the release of Doctor Sleep last fall, he kind of softened because you know, with Flanagan's take on Doctor Sleep, he kind of was able to merge that Kubrick vision of The Shining with Stephen King's, you know, written sequel to it, and so he's kind of be able to bring it together. But other ones that are slightly closer adaptations, I really like Misery quite a bit with Kathy Bates. I think that's a great one. Um, and then I find myself often liking the movies that are actually adaptations of Stephen King's short stories better than I like most of the novel adaptations. And so we've got, you know, many of the ones that are not actually horror, you know, things like Stand By Me and Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile. Those ones are all based on short stories. But a more horror aimed one, The Mist. I really enjoy The Mist. That's got one of the most kind of shocking, impactful endings, and I remember seeing that in the theater, and people were just very surprised and very quiet at the end of that movie. And that was one, I know a lot of people hate that ending, but I actually like it. I think it's very fitting. Um, but you know, a lot of his stories, the new um, it kind of remakes, I guess, if you will, because we had the It miniseries, the 1991 with Tim Curry as Pennywise, but then the Andy Muschietti It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 are both really good. I've very much enjoyed those. You know, and then all of his other ones, like they're not the best adaptations to me and not the best movies necessarily. You know, things like, you know, Pet Cemetery, kind of either one, the 1989 version or the 2019 remake. You know, I like them, but they're not my favorites. Probably kind of a uncommon opinion is with Carrie. I know a lot of people really like Brian De Palma's Carrie, and I enjoy it again, but it's not one that's like, you know, big one for me. You know, movies like Cujo and Christine. I know you were talking about John Carpenter on your channel last year, and so Christine is one that the book kind of always connected with me more because those three, Pet Cemetery, well, actually, Cujo first. Cujo, Christine, Pet Cemetery were the first three Stephen King novels I read. Again, I was pretty young. I think I was in seventh grade, so I was probably like 12 when I read those. And so they really stuck with me and kind of, helped form, I think, the direction, at least in terms of reading, that I went kind of more with horror, but then making that jump to movies. And most of those Stephen King movies I watched like immediately after reading the novel. So I used to go through and read a book and then go at the time rent rent the DVD from like Hollywood Video or something, and then read the next one and do the same thing again.
So you talk about, in particular, the short story or novella adaptations. And so you mentioned Stand By Me, which I love. I love that. I had that on VHS as a kid, and I watched that over and over and over again. I couldn't get enough of that. That was so beautiful. And then The Shawshank Redemption, of course, and The Mist, which I also agree wholeheartedly. And there were also others too. There's so many, too many to mention right now, but others too that were like, was that Cat's Eye
Hmm.
and
Yeah, Creep Show and Creep
Lawnmower?
Show
Yeah,
2.
yeah, yeah.
Those were like the short, like the ones that actually kind of got adapted in movie form as short stories
Yeah.
too. They were kind of short film compilations.
And there was also, you mentioned Pet Cemetery, both of them, and then I remember Pet Cemetery 2, which is kind of an interesting one, and the Lawnmower Man as well, which was
Hmm.
also very interesting. And so there was this huge wave. Incidentally, what were some of your favorite books by Stephen King that you read?
So I really liked Cujo. And that, again, that was my first one. So I think I might be a little skewed on that or kind of biased because of that. Because it was such a different style of writing. It was so blunt and very, I don't know, I was expecting, I don't know what I was expecting. Like I knew who Stephen King was, but it was more of a broad, like, oh, Stephen King, Maine, ha ha ha. Again, I was living in New York at the time. So it's kind of funny that I'm in Maine now. But that, yeah, so Cujo was a big one for me. Pet Cemetery was a pretty impactful one too, because as a kid and even now, like animals are my thing. Obviously, the bear here, right? And so I went to school for college for wildlife ecology and stuff. So animals have always been a big thing for me, and so that's why I read Cujo first and Pet Cemetery shortly after. And so that those ones kind of connected. And Pet Cemetery especially was more, it gets into some really dark stuff beyond just just like the cat, but there's a lot to that one, a lot of dealing with grief and a lot of things that are much darker and kind of higher thematically than people might, or more in depth thematically than people might think or anticipate. So that one, again, I was reading this when I was like 12 or 13 years old, so that was kind of like impactful. It was another big one for me. That was just such an immersive book. I mean, it's like I don't even remember 1,400 whatever. It's like a huge book, and there's just so much detail and so much to it, and um, so creepy. And it's funny thinking back on it now that I'm reading about basically where I would end up living 15 years later, because I live just outside of Bangor, Maine, which is what Derry, Maine, the location of it, and referenced in so many sorry, I hit the microphone, referenced in so many Stephen King books. He based Derry on Bangor because that's where Stephen King lives. He's like a 15-minute drive from my house. And so he, that it's interesting seeing that and kind of looking at these things that are just landmarks, that I'm like, oh, he's talking about the Derry standpipe, but I'm like, oh, that's the Thomas Hill standpipe right down the road, And so, Pet Cemetery does the same thing in that Lewis Creed, he works at Cutler Health Center, which is on the University of Maine campus. So that's where I went to school, and I live very close to it. I went to the Cutler Health Center when I was sick in college, and so it's so interesting having all these things that are like, I grew up reading about these places and then kind of living in those places and kind of having that. So some of these books have kind of morphed a little bit for me in terms of that, having this extra extra layer of interest, or kind of connection there. Um, but the Shining was another big one for me, in terms of the book. And again, very, very different from Kubrick's The Shining. There's the more Stephen King similar adaptation that was
Yeah,
like um, uh, I don't know if it was a mini series or what it was. I have
I
that
think it
one on
was.
DVD
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
I haven't seen that in a long time, actually. I should revisit it, because I remember, thinking, okay, it's much closer to the book, but it didn't have that same feel. It didn't have the same dread. It didn't have the same like amazement, to me at least, that the Kubrick version did, for obvious reasons. That was more like a made for TV thing versus Stanley Kubrick. But yeah, so just there's a lot of Stephen King books that are big for me.
That is so interesting. I have to ask you two things about Stephen King, and then we'll go on. But first, what do you feel about The Dead Zone, the book, and the Cronenberg adaptation with Christopher Walken? And how do you feel about the Dark Tower series?
So, The Dead Zone, I liked that book. I read that in that same kind of era, I guess, for me in junior high, and I thought it was really interesting. And again, it's another one that kind of gets at so many different things. You've got the obvious kind of science fiction horror aspect of him, being able. Geez, I keep hitting that mic. I'm gesticulating too much. And so him being able to touch people, and being able to sense things about them, but then it's got that whole, like, it has this whole political aspect and this darker thing, and it's very interesting. So I liked that book quite a bit. The movie, it's another one I haven't seen in a while. I do have it. It's one that hasn't, at least in the US, I don't believe, hasn't been released on Blu-ray. So I still have the DVD for that one. And I remember liking it, but not as much as I had hoped to like it, I guess. But it's one that it's been a long time since I watched it. Again, probably around that time period, probably when I was 14 or 15. It was probably the last time I saw that. And Dark Tower, I actually haven't read any of the Dark Tower books. So I did see the movie, the one that came out a few years ago, which was kind of like, it's okay, kind of, sort of, of course I didn't have the base of having read the books to be able to compare, but it was okay. But I know people love those books, and I just, there's so many of them, I just haven't ever gotten into it. And I used to typically stick more with his more horror movies too, but horror
Yeah,
books, and that kind of got more sci-fi, and kind of, it had a lot of different things to it. And
yeah.
so I just never, haven't yet at least, gotten into that series.
Well, if you do decide to start the Dark Tower series, I'm absolutely positive you will enjoy it immensely. I think when you start, it's very difficult to stop, and so
Hmm.
I really think you'll enjoy it very much. So, but actually, that's right. There was the film adaptation, which I didn't see. It was kind of recent. I'm not so good with recent film release. It's maybe not so recent. It's been a couple years now, maybe more. But
Yeah, I think 2017, I think, maybe.
is that it? Yeah.
I
So
think so.
okay, and they haven't made any subsequent films after that, right?
No,
Okay. Well,
they
who
left
knows?
themselves open to it, but they haven't
Oh,
done
I'm
it.
sure they did.
I don't think it
Yeah.
did very well, so I'm not sure if we're
Uh,
gonna get any more.
well, hopefully there might be some more opportunities for Dark Tower adaptations, maybe more film adaptations or TV series or whatever. I actually think a TV series would be really really perfect for that kind of world and what it's trying to do. But it's actually quite complicated, very complicated. And so but but man, who knows? One of these days. But
He's good with those interconnected things, even all of his
yeah,
books, right? Everything
yeah,
connects, everything's referenced. Pennywise gets referenced in so many other books, and
yeah.
the locations and everything. So he definitely kind of crafts his own sort of universe within his writing.
Oh, he sure does, and that's what I think one of the great appeal points of his works. There's a really lovely sense of connectivity and community. You mentioned, of course, Derry, Maine. There's of course the Castle Rock.
Hmm.
There's Castle Rock's books as well. And incidentally, I recently, speaking of Castle Rock, I recently saw again the film Needful Things,
Yep.
and with yeah, so I thought that was I thought it was good when I first saw it many years ago, but it's grown on me much more
Mm.
now. So, but that's interesting. Yeah, Stephen King works. I'm a big fan as well. So. But then, my friend, you're so enthusiastic about Stephen King and also Stanley Kubrick and Alfred Hitchcock as well. And so I have to ask you now, my friend, what are some of your favorite films now? What are those films that you could say right now, today, would be some of your favorite movies or films or works of cinema?
So the ones that are my favorites, many of the movies that I loved growing up have stayed with me as like still some of my top favorite movies. And so I don't know, I feel like people are going to be kind of disappointed in my answers here because they're not, the cinematic greats, like all these movies that I do love watching, but like all the great movies, aren't really the ones that I'm like, oh, that's my favorite movie of all time. So I have a lot of comedies actually that end up taking the top spots for me, and I think part of it's kind of rewatchability and just kind of they're the types of movies that you can like put on and just enjoy in any type of circumstance. Whereas like the heavier or darker movies, like I really do love them and I love watching them, but it's like they take something out of you, sometimes to watch. And so these ones that I've watched a ton throughout my life are the ones that stay as kind of my favorite movies. So again, like people are probably gonna be laughing at some, well, definitely laughing at these because they're, probably not anybody else's kind of top movies who considers themselves, a movie lover. But Shaun of the Dead is actually my favorite movie of all time, and so yeah, I can see your shocked face, um, and
I
so
love that. I'm sorry to interrupt. I love that movie. I love Shaun of the Dead. I am a huge fan of Shaun of the Dead. I everything about that, everything about just I cornetto. I think about that. I want a cornetto. I can't even get a cornetto, and I want a cornetto every time. I'm sorry, but go on, please.
no,
Shaun of the
no.
Dead, fantastic. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now I have your support, so I feel better about this answer. And so, yeah, Shaun of the Dead. It was one that I saw that in theaters. I remember seeing the trailer for that because it was probably it was the movie came out 2004, and so 2003 was when I first saw the first trailer. I remember just thinking it was the funniest thing because there's a shot of Simon Pegg walking, and you hear him, he's actually yawning, but you hear kind of this zombie moan, and you think it's just him like yawning. And like it was just, I don't know, like it struck me as funny, and I was like, I really want to see that. And then I loved that movie. I mean, just it was one of those ones that the story, and it's funny, but it also has great editing. Like and so like the whole Cornetto trilogy really has the same stylistic approach. Edgar Wright and his editing style. It's just so good. The quick editing, and it's funny, and there's actual like kind of straight comedy, but situational humor, and just it's just, I don't know. It's one that I've watched so many times. It probably rivals like Lion King with the number of times I've seen it, and it had a 10-year later start. But I don't know, that one. That one has always been a really big movie for me since it came out. And other comedies too that I just, I don't know, grew up loving. And these other ones are older. That's sort of not a recent movie anymore, but it was one that I actually saw in theaters. But then there were other ones that came out before I was alive. Things like um Coming to America with Eddie Murphy. So it's another one that, like, who picks that as one of their favorite movies? But apparently me. That's one that I watched a lot when I was a kid, but with my dad. And so some of these movies, a lot, Shaun of the Dead, not so much, but some of these other ones are just movies I grew up watching with my dad a lot. And like we still, anytime I visit home, still like we somehow end up watching most of these movies almost every time, and we just like quote them, and it's just it has become this thing for me. So Coming to America, Major League. One that I did see in theaters with my dad when I was a kid, Galaxy Quest. again, like who who picks that as one of their favorites? Especially, when I was a kid, I didn't know anything about Star Trek. I didn't even know that like that it was kind of a sort of a parody, spoof, homage to it. I just liked the movie and found it very funny. And so some of these movies are just still my favorites. And again, like, I'm like, oh, I've got all these things, we're talking about Kubrick and like all this, but like, yeah. So I have kind of strange movie tastes, I guess, in that sense. Other thing, Back to the Future, the whole Back to the Future trilogy are ones that I just really always enjoyed. And a lot of the Disney movies, Lion King is still up there for me. That's still my favorite animated movie of any studio. But Pixar films, I mean, I saw many of those. Pixar
Hmm.
Toy Story came out first, and I was 5 years old when that one came out. So I grew up with Pixar, watching all of these movies. So Toy Story and Monsters Inc. were like big ones for me. The Incredibles. I was a little older for that one, but so I mean, it's kind of a strange answer, I guess, that a lot of these are movies. Midnight Run, another kind of
Yeah.
one that was before my time, but one I grew up watching with my dad. And so I think a lot of that's the comedy side rewatching, but also the family side comes into play with most of my favorites.
I don't think you should you don't have to be ashamed at all. I think that's a absolutely splendid answer for a number of reasons. I think first, you know, I remember seeing the film Coming to America too, and I was just laughing. There's when he says the Big Mick. I just I'm
They
just
got the big, they got the
yeah,
Big Mac. We got the Big Mac.
yeah. This
Our
is
buns
just
have no seeds.
yes. I'm just it's just that always gets me, and
I feel like breakdancing.
yeah.
Yeah. Me and my dad have like entire conversations just in Coming to America quotes. Like all these, and no, everybody else is like yeah, get the most obscure lines that nobody knows. Yeah.
It's wonderful, and it also reminds me of something that I really believe in, which is this idea of a personal experience of films, either if it's a really personal to you, or if that means also watching it with your family or friends. And you mentioned also these were films that you remember watching with your father,
Hmm.
and so I'm really taken with that in particular because this is something that I too am very much into. Is I remember the films in particular. There's a large group of films from my own past that I remember in particular because of how much I enjoyed watching them with my mom or with my dad, or when I was a little kid growing up. And not just seeing the film, but also seeing them looking over, they're sitting next to me and they're looking at their faces as they were watching the film and they were really into it. And I was like, oh, I want to be into the same things they're into. And that really just fed into this
Exactly.
common love. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yes, definitely. Like, I totally agree. There are so many movies, even some of these comedies, where it's like I would watch a movie maybe for the first time or two when I was little, and like I thought it was okay, but I wasn't like, laughing out loud about them. But my dad would find these like random things, not even the like joke moments, but sometimes just a facial expression or like a random line. He would find it hysterical. And so he'd like be over there dying laughing. And so I would laugh at him laughing at that moment in the movie. And now, like, years and years later, I watched that movie by myself, and like the line might not be funny, but I find myself laughing because I'm thinking of him laughing at that that line. And so it definitely, like, I agree. And there are certain movies that just, you know, that my dad really really liked, and I kind of grew to like, beyond not just the comedy aspects of them, but other things. One that we grew up, or I grew up watching a lot, and I always enjoyed, but I've come to really really like more, is It's a Wonderful Life. We watch it every year on Christmas, and like it's one of those ones that my dad just, he laughs at really random things. It's not really a funny movie, but like, when he goes Zuzu's pedals, and he just, so that has become a line, Zuzu's pedals, for us, like just a quote that we say. And so they're definitely So I kind of went off on a little tangent there, but I totally agree that having that experience, you can kind of relate movies to certain things, certain people, and
Yeah.
so definitely I think that's one of the really amazing things about movies, about film, is that there's such a personal connection to it. I mean, the director and all the filmmakers could have had some certain intention or certain thing that they were trying to get at with the movie, but like every individual person brings their own things to the movie when they go see it, their own experiences, their own like situation in the moment, their own people that they're seeing it with. If you're seeing it in the theater versus seeing it at home versus seeing it in the drive-in, and so having that element to it, I think, makes it's such an interesting thing and something that can evolve over time, like watching just one movie several times over your life, and it's just a very cool thing about movies.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I think you say it with such enthusiasm, but you say it much better than I do. This idea of capturing a really personal connection that is also linked with an enthusiasm for cinema. And there's something about it. I don't know. It's you get it with other forms of art, I think, as well. But there's just something about it, just sitting there with someone and sharing that experience. It can be very personal, but it can be very communal at the same time. And just uh, I think you hit the nail on the head, uh, very precisely and astutely with that. I agree wholeheartedly. And this also brings me to the fact that you are obviously a very passionate and enthusiastic film lover, and I think that's very evident by many things. You mentioned that you can still watch your Blu-ray of Lion King. You mentioned also that you have the DVD of The Dead Zone, I think, right?
Yeah.
And so that it means that you have physical media. You can tell by the shelves in the back there, you have physical media. And so uh, could you tell us a little bit about your philosophy or perspective when it comes to home media consumption? Are you solely physical media? Do you have streaming services? What in particular do you like to collect, or do you consider yourself a collector? And these sorts of things. Could you share with us some of your insights into this aspect of film appreciation?
Sure. So I am primarily physical media. I do have some streaming services. I have Netflix. I've actually had Netflix back like since back in the actual DVD days when they would mail you. I think they still do it, but when they used to mail DVDs to your house, that was when I started with Netflix. I've got Prime Video because I have Amazon Prime, so you just get it with that. I recently got Disney Plus just to review a specific movie, but I very, very rarely use my streaming services. I think they're a potentially good thing, but I just personally don't use them much because I have too many physical movies. I have quite a few that I still need to watch. I have like a couple shelves over there of Blu-rays that I just haven't actually watched the physical copy of yet. So I kind of chip away at those. I watch at least one movie every day, not necessarily from that unwatched pile, but I chip away at it over time. But in terms of my collection, this is just kind of a small percentage here. I don't know what you guys can see. So you can see up to that shelf, right? And so there's another shelf above this one, and then you can kind of see here. So there are 4 shelves below the bare shelf. Um, and so it goes kind of floor to ceiling. I got shelves, same type going that way. I got those same shelves across the whole other back wall there. In terms of collecting, I've got an assortment here. I don't really collect just a single type of movie or a single, I don't just collect Criterion, though I certainly have quite a few Criterion, but it's just kind of movies that I like or just movies that I wanted to own or movies that I had when I was younger that maybe I don't necessarily like all that much, but I couldn't I couldn't get rid of them, and like I was like, well, now there's a Blu-ray, so I got to upgrade it to the Blu-ray. So the vast majority of my collection is Blu-ray. Probably about, I don't know, 2,500 Blu-rays or so, movies on Blu-ray. And then I've got still some DVDs. You can kind of see like a Disney one there. And so a few DVDs that are still left over that just have never have never been released on Blu-ray, at least in the U.S. I don't have a region-free Blu-ray player, so I just stick to the U.S. releases for the most part. Some Canadian ones, but so I still have DVDs, probably, I don't know, 150, 200 or so that have not yet had Blu-ray upgrades. Some of them I'm sure never will. But it seems every year we get a few of them, or I get a few of them kind of to swap out. So that's nice. I still have a couple VHSs actually too, that never even got DVD releases. And it's silly because I don't even have a VCR anymore, so I have no way of playing these. But I still have the tapes. Not many though, like 15 or so. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know if I really have a philosophy with collecting. Like, it's just, I guess I kind of consider myself to be a collector. Like, I've always liked collecting things. I'm not somebody who's like, oh, I can't like open it. Has to say has to stay sealed. I actually like watch these movies, and that was kind of one of the reasons why I have that unwatched blue shelf, because I don't let myself put a movie in the main shelves until I've watched the actual physical copy of the Blu-ray and watched all the special features. Because I used to not be good about that when I was just DVDs. When I was younger, as a teenager, I used to get them, and I'd get them for my birthday, get them for Christmas and everything, and then they'd go on the shelf and I'd almost never watch them just because I had a lot of them, and I just would watch the ones I really liked all the time. And so when I made the transition to Blu-ray, I was kind of late to that game. It was probably 2014 when I started in on the Blu-rays. I had a pretty decent DVD collection before that, but I kind of made a deal with myself that if I was gonna go and actually transition to Blu-rays, that I had to watch every edition. Like, I couldn't just put it on the shelf and say, oh, I just replaced it. So it's been nice. Like, I've actually gotten through basically certainly all of my old existing collection. I've rewatched all of those movies in the last 6 years now, and so that's been kind of nice. Nice to revisit a lot of films that I hadn't seen in a while.
What are
But
some
leaves me
recommendations? Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. Please go
no.
ahead.
I was just gonna say it leaves me with a little bit of a backlog that I still have to get through of some Blu-rays.
Oh, what? That's fantastic. Wow, such a great collection. What are some of your recommended titles that you have in your collection that you could recommend to us? Just some
Um,
examples.
Man, there's a lot that I enjoy. I mean, I have certainly criterions that I think you could probably speak to a little bit better than I can, because you're very focused on those. Man, I don't even know, I don't even know how to really approach that question. Like how I had pulled out, like I had, since I was talking about The Shining earlier. I pulled out that the Blu-ray of a Steelbook for that. So I guess that's a slightly different thing. I don't just collect one like style. I like the Steelbooks if it comes in kind of Steelbook form. I frequently get those, but I have digibooks. I have random slip covers are kind of a thing for me. So I have the slip cover for most things. Stephen King here, actually, Firestarter. And so I'm kind of a slipcover person. I know many people are like, oh, big deal, it's just cardboard, but I don't know. I guess I am a collector if I am kind of into that. But man, I really don't. I don't even know how to answer your answer your question in terms of like one or a few movies from the collection. There are so many things. I mean, Criterion ones, I had pulled out a few Criterions, since I think people probably watching your channel, watching this video, will like Criterions. So I got Ace in the Hole, which is a great Billy Wilder one. Very interesting kind of examination of media and media manipulation, and kind of it's a very interesting story. I pulled out Being There. I'm not good with the reflection of the light there, but Being There, the movie's good, not the reflection. So that's a movie that actually that I my dad had recommended back, kind of earlier in my Criterion, certainly before I found your channel. So I didn't get the recommendation from you, unfortunately, but I've got many others from you. But Being There was one that he said that he had liked when it first came out, and so I watched it. I watched it actually when I was visiting home once with him, and so I don't know, that one struck me. It wasn't what I had expected. So that was a good one. Charade is a great one. That is very. I think we've talked about this before. How it has a lot of kind of Hitchcockian influence, and so certainly Hitchcock. Like I didn't even pull any of those off, but lots of Hitchcock that I enjoy. But Charade was one that I was really happy. I hadn't seen it before I got the Criterion release, and I'd been meaning to. It was one of those movies that I really wanted to watch and ended up loving it. Pan's Labyrinth. This is actually one of my favorite films. I didn't mention it earlier when I was talking about comedies, but Pan's Labyrinth is actually one of my favorites. I saw that in the theater, and it's one of the movies that I probably saw the most times actually at the theater. I think I saw it 4 times in the theater when it first came out, and so I've always really enjoyed that one. And then one that you actually just had a video on, I think yesterday, Y tu mamá también. And so I had pulled that one out. So I really enjoy that one too. And it's just it's one I would recommend, and I know you recommended it too. So
Oh, wonderful. That is really wonderful. And you've spoken about a number of Criterion titles, all of them I also appreciate. A number of them I haven't actually spoken about, so I'm so glad you mentioned those. I really have to get going with that. I have to talk more about those. But incidentally, could I ask you, how is the Firestarter Blu-ray?
yeah, so it's pretty good. It's a
Is
I think this was Shout Factory, Scream
Yes, I think
Factory.
so.
Yep.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it was good. It had quite a few special features. There was so commentary, a couple commentary tracks, a bunch of interviews, the trailer. So this one was very good. It was one that I hadn't actually seen the movie. I have the book, and I read the book a long time ago, but for some reason I hadn't seen the movie at the time. Like all the other ones I would read the book, watch the movie, but for some reason this movie at least fell through the cracks for me. So I didn't actually see this until this Scream Factory release came out. So it was good, and it's really good, quality, and very good uh, audio too.
And so you enjoyed the movie as well?
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things that when I was a kid, kind of first looking at those books, I was kind of like, Carrie and Firestarter is like, how is that not the same thing? But it's
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, it's very different, but it has similar elements to it. And so yeah, I enjoyed that one. It's not one of my favorites of the movies, but I think it's one of the better adaptations in terms of some of the earlier, because that was in the 80s, I believe, right? Because that's young Drew Barrymore, right? Isn't
Yeah,
she
Drew Barrymore
Fires?
and George C. Scott, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
So that's yeah, that was probably in that area or that time when there were quite a lot of Stephen King adaptations to film, right? So in
right,
that sweet spot, if you will,
yeah,
of 80s cinema, and so that's really great. That's fantastic. And so speaking of your film enthusiasm, of course, your film enthusiasm extends to film Blu-rays and DVDs, as you mentioned just now, and also your love of watching movies. You mentioned your memories of watching them with your father, and also many other films you saw growing up as a kid, first in New York and then when you moved now to Maine. And so that brings me to Maine and Mainly Movies, which is the name of your fantastic YouTube channel, Mainly Movies. So it's, could you tell me, how do you spell mainly?
So it'd be Mainely. So mainly like you would normally spell, but stick in the E because it's the state of Maine.
So that's on purpose, right? To
Yes.
emphasize the fact that this is from Maine in the United States. Is that correct?
Yes. Hmm.
That is fantastic. That is really cool. And what kinds of I watch your channel a lot, and so I know the types of things that you are doing now. But just for anyone who is meeting you for the first time, what are some of the things that you do or you try to do on your YouTube channel, Mainly Movies? Could you share with us a little bit about the channel and what's it about and what your thoughts are about it and what your plans are for it?
Yeah. So I do a few kind of movie related things on the channel. I guess the core type of content would be movie reviews. So I do kind of film reviews, and it's kind of split in terms of what types of reviews I do in terms of old versus new and genres. I don't really have like a specific niche. I don't just do horror. I don't just do new movies. I don't just do classic films. um, Certainly the past year or so has been a lot of newer releases. I go or went to the movies, to the theater like once or twice a week. So I saw a lot of new releases, and so I would do reviews for those. But I didn't just exclusively do new releases. I also like older films, and many times I would talk about franchises. So I would review movies leading up to like a new sequel in a franchise. So I did, like The Lion King. We were talking about that earlier. So ahead of the Lion King remake release, I reviewed the original animated Lion King, but I also reviewed Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, and Lion King 1.5. So the other sequels that came out, the direct to video sequels in that case. But Toy Story, I did the whole sequence of Toy Story movies when Toy Story 4 came out. The Terminator, when Dark Fate came out last year, I reviewed all of the Terminator movies, all of the Rambo movies, right? The First Blood series when Rambo Last Blood came out last fall. And so I do a lot of that. Now things are a little different, obviously, in the midst of our current situation. No real surge of new movies, certainly no theatrical releases. But there are a few movies that have been coming out either on streaming or video on demand. So again, I'm not a huge streaming person, so there are definitely other people who really focus in on that if people are interested in those. But I do have some movies that I've done of kind of more recent streaming films. I've got some movies recently that I've gotten some screeners for, some critic screeners. So I get to see them a little bit early. So a few situations like that of new movies coming out. Like for instance, today, I don't know when you're going to post this, but on Thursday in the U.S. I was able to watch or put out my review for Radioactive, which is the new Madame Curie biopic, and so that's not coming out until tomorrow, technically, on Amazon Prime Video, at least in the U.S. I don't know about other locations, but so I've had. Oop, did I mute? Oh, sorry. And so I, have that, but I've also been doing. Older releases. I know we've talked about it quite a bit. The Bond franchise. I've been going through that series, and again, though that initially at least started as a lead up to No Time to Die, but now I don't have much confidence that that's probably gonna. I don't think that's gonna stay in its current release date. But I'm gonna keep going with the series. So I've got that kind of thing going on. So it's mostly movie reviews, but I do rankings of films. So when I do review all the movies in a franchise, or so far in the Bond series, for instance, I've been kind of doing rankings of the movies in certain eras. The Connery era, the Brosnan era, and so forth. Um, And so I have that, rare trailer review or trailer reactions, more trailer reviews for new movies. Again, that's something that has certainly fallen off in recent months here, because we haven't really been getting many new trailers. But movie reviews are kind of the core of everything for me.
And that is fantastic. I love your channel for many reasons. And one of the reasons is that when there is, say, a timely new release of a film, let's say, for instance, I think to just use The Lion King as an example, if I'm not mistaken, bef- just around the time of the release of the photorealistic remake of the film, I think that was where you were talking a lot about the Lion King films, and you
Yep.
were going into each of the films, including the direct-to-video titles. And also, you had mentioned, for instance, the Bond films. And so you had initially started the Bond journey on your channel in anticipation for the initially planned release of the new film, No Time to Die. And so I think these are two examples of what I really, really love, which is that when there is a timely release, you start a little bit early prior to that to just get into that, and you don't just do one or two films. You go through like the entire series of films all the way up to the sort of anticipating the new release of the film that will be in the theaters, which will then be the way that you can sort of cap off that series that you did. And you do this for, I think, a lot of films, which is
Yeah.
very impressive, really, really impressive. I mean, I do this YouTube thing as well, and I can appreciate how much effort and time is needed to make videos, and to do thumbnails and to do descriptions and to edit and all this stuff. I can appreciate this. And so with that, I really am so in awe of that kind of effort that you put into it, and it's consistent too. It's not like there's a lull. It's like you have a video up. I want to say it feels to me like it's every day or every other day or something. So in other words, it's a very consistent and wonderfully dense upload schedule, and with directing many various types of films. And so I just want to say to you, now that you're here face to face, I just want to say to you how much I really appreciate that, and how much I am so impressed by that kind of work ethic and dedication. I really am impressed. It's such just a great job. You set such a great example for me and for many other people. It's really well done, well done.
Thank you. I'm flattered. I don't have nearly the denseness of your videos, though. I mean, you put a multiple a day, oftentimes. So this is, it's an honor for you to say something like that about my
Uh,
channel.
no, no, not at all. It's just because what I love is there is a sense of how should I put it? There is a sense of a kind of order. There's a sense of there's a reason behind your schedule like this, which is the anticipated release of the new film in the franchise 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now. And that's what I really love. I love how you then, as you say, with the Bond films, it had really started with the anticipated release of No Time to Die. That's changed, of course, but still you're ongoing with this. And then you also work with the material. You know, that you do ranking videos and things of that nature, which I think are a lot of fun. And so really, I just want to applaud your efforts, and just say well done, and keep up the real excellent work with that. And I think it's really just well done. And as I say, you set such a wonderful example for me and for a lot of people. And I should ask though, but speaking of Bond, please let me ask you, for anyone who's interested in more in-depth comments, of course, you should check out Mainly Movies, mainly MAINE, and check out all of her videos, because so many to talk about. But now that I have you here, what are some of the highlights for you in the Bond film journey that you are now currently undertaking? What are some of those film favorites or moments or actors or sequences that you found particularly memorable in that
Yeah.
journey?
So right now in this journey, I just in terms of posting schedule, tomorrow or Friday is going to be my review for Die Another Day. So I'll be wrapping up the Brosnan era, and then a rankography or my ranking video for that will come afterwards. But so in terms of that, that's where I am. But I'm actually going to start rewatching the Connery era. Or not Connery era, sorry, Craig era, um, leading up. I'm probably actually going to rewatch Casino Royale tonight, and so that's going to be good timing for your live stream coming up here. So that's actually worked out a few times here where I've been up to a certain point in the franchise at like the perfect moment to be fresh for your live streams. But so I don't want to talk about the Craig era because I feel like they're not as fresh. You know, it's been a while actually since I've watched those, but I did. I do really enjoy Casino Royale quite a bit. But in terms of other ones, like Goldfinger has always been one of my favorites, and that kind of ties back to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. That was the first one I ever saw. I saw that when I was pretty young. I watched it with my dad, and so it was kind of a good experience. And the song, the theme song for Goldfinger, again, it's one of those like, why would that be something you like? But that was a song that just for whatever reason when I was a little kid I loved the Shirley Bassey theme song for Goldfinger. But so that movie's a big one for me. From Russia with Love is another highlight for me in terms of the Bond franchise, just because it's such a kind of a different style than what we really see almost anywhere else in the franchise. It's a much more espionage driven story. It certainly has some humor, some goofy stuff, but it also kind of solidifies some of the Bond tropes. This is when Desmond Llewellyn comes on as Q. We get some of the first kind of true gadgets, I guess, if you will, for the franchise. And so From Russia with Love is another big one. But it's just there are so many highlights from kind of throughout the franchise for me. I'm not somebody who just only likes one actor or one era. I enjoy all of them, and so that's going to be a challenge for me when it comes to the end, when I actually do kind of an overall ranking, because I even right now I have no idea what I'm going to do. Like I really got to think about it, and it's going to be very, very challenging.
That's great because I think the Bond films have so much variety that it you know I completely understand what you say when you say that it's difficult to rank them, and I think the ranking can can vary and change depending on the day. It's very, very difficult to solidify and finalize a ranking, a ranked list. I completely get it because it's such a vast series. And sometimes you like one film more than the rest. And then other days you feel, oh no, I really like this film a lot. And that kind of process just goes on and on and on, which is I think one of the fun things about the Bond films, very much so. But oh, that's really wonderful. And thank you so much for the Casino Royale reference. I appreciate that. I haven't even talked about the live stream schedule, so you're talking more about it than I am. So I'm so flattered. Thank you. I have to get on that. So I'll send a reminder to everyone. So you reminded me to
There
remind
you
people. Thank you so much.
go. Yeah.
You know about my channel more than I do. So I'm really, really flattered about that. Thank you. And I know that you and I have spoken a lot also, for example, on those live streams on the Bond film so far. And so your comments are just all the time. I always look forward to them very much. Truly, I do, because it's you always bring the kind of energy and freshness that you've brought today to this conversation, and I really appreciate it. And so, just some final things, and maybe if it's okay. I don't want you to say anything that you don't want to say, but at the moment, I know you said you had a schedule, upload schedule about the some films that you were seeing recently. But without necessarily revealing too much, if you don't want to, could you tell us a little bit about your future plans for the channel? Are there any videos in particular that you'd like us to keep in mind, keep a lookout for in the coming days and weeks at Mainly Movies? What are some of your plans going forward with that, just to let everyone know?
Yeah, so the Bond franchise is kind of one of the sort of weekly things I've been doing. So I post videos, unless there's some new movie that I get a screener for or something. Like my regular schedule is a twice a week posting, so I'll post Tuesdays and Fridays, and so that's I usually post at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. And so Fridays have kind of fallen into being my Bond day. And so, like I said, this Friday, so tomorrow is going to be Die Another Day. And then the following Friday will be my ranking for the Brosnan era Bond movies. The next Friday will be Casino Royale and so forth. So it's going to be pretty regularly Fridays, unless something else comes up. But that's the plan. And Tuesdays, right now at least, kind of a very different type of franchise that I'm currently in the midst of doing is the Conjuring universe, so the horror movies. So that was another one that was originally intended to be a lead up to The Conjuring 3, which was supposed to come out in September, but that just a few days ago got pushed. It got pushed to June of next year. So it's not going to be quite as timely as I would have liked. But I'm going to keep doing, I'm going to finish out the existing Conjuring universe films. But that's kind of what I'm doing on Tuesdays. But actually, today we just got the announcement from the Comic-Con at Home. San Diego Comic-Con was doing their announcements and streaming for certain newer movies. So actually, Bill and Ted 3, Bill and Ted Face the Music, if anybody's a Bill and Ted fan, that was originally supposed to come out in theaters in August, but has since been pushed to video on demand. And so that'll be coming out September 1st. And so I'll probably end up doing Bill and Ted, the two, excellent adventure bogus journey. I'll do reviews of those. So those are probably in the, next couple weeks. I imagine I'll probably have reviews for those.
There we go. So that is fantastic. That is absolutely fantastic. And I think we have a lot to look forward to. Bill and Ted and Die Another Day. I can't wait to hear your thoughts about Die Another Day. I'm just quite excited for that. And so this is going to be so much fun. So, my dear friends, please, if you haven't already, please check out Mainly Movies. That's mainly MAINELY and then movies. All the information will be in the description box below. And so you can check out the channel if you haven't already. And if it's any indication, the conversation today has been so wonderful and splendid and warm and engaging. And that's the same type of feeling and atmosphere that I get every time I watch one of your videos on your channel. And so, but just to get it, we'll talk to you face to face, Alyssa, like this has been a real joy. And so I can't stress enough. I can't recommend enough your wonderful channel. It's really great. And so anyone who hasn't checked it out, please check it out, subscribe, check out all the videos, comment, hit the bell notification icon and all that. It really, really helps. And you can watch Alyssa's great channel twice a week at 9:30 a.m. That is a really fantastic professional schedule. I am very impressed. Much better than my schedule. Much better. That's fantastic. I have a lot to learn from you, my friend. Really, you're such an inspiration.
Likewise, I mean, your channel, like I discovered your channel last year. I wish I had found it earlier, because your channel and your videos are just so thoughtful, and you talk about so many movies that nobody else talks about. Like nobody talks about some of these things, especially on YouTube. And so you really you know your stuff. It's amazing how eloquent you are when you talk about some of these movies, and you bring in such kind of insight, and just again very thought provoking, very compelling. So I'm more in awe of your channel. This has really been an honor to be able to talk to you like this.
Oh, you're too kind. You're too kind. But really, I'm very humbled by that. But completely, I don't deserve it really, because as I say, it's just I think if anything, if I can, if it's giving me. I mean, one of the great things about doing the channels, it's given me the opportunity to meet so many wonderful people, such as yourself, Alyssa. That's been one of the great benefits of this, and so I'm just so honored. And today, you do me so many great honors. You're very complimentary, but also you give us some of your very precious time and your insight into cinema. And so I, for one, am very appreciative, my friend. Thank you so much for this. And please, we must do this again very soon, if that's okay with you. I hope this
Yeah,
wasn't, yeah,
definitely.
if this was okay, then if you don't mind,
Yeah,
we can do this again. And so
yeah,
maybe
I'd
we
love
can,
to.
is that okay?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, wonderful. So let's talk later about that, and I'd love to hear yeah, I'd love to hear more about your film journey story and your channel. So let's do this again very soon, if that's okay.
Definitely.
All right. So Alyssa at Mainly Movies in Maine, in the United States. Please take care and thank you so much. And to everyone who has been watching, thank you so much for your time. And please continue to be well and stay safe during these times. And I will see you very, very soon. And once again, please check out Mainly Movies YouTube channel. It is fantastic. So anyway, thank you very much, my friends, and cheers.